I still remember the moment I realized getting married was the biggest mistake of my life. The warnings had been there, loud and clear, and I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard them. My best friend Brian had warned me the most, his words echoing in my mind. "I won't be your best man. I won't be a part of the biggest mistake of your life," he said. But I didn't listen. I loved Michelle with all my heart, and I believed, truly believed, that our love would overcome any past mistakes. Brian, however, knew her better than I did. "She loves you, Jimmy, but she loves him too. She always has. She's been a cheat since high school and she won't stop now. She's not the kind of woman who can be satisfied by one man," he warned. I brushed off his concerns, convinced that things were different now. Michelle had changed. We were in love, and that was all that mattered. The truth, though, was harder to ignore. I had known who Michelle was for as long as I could remember. She lived 2 houses down from me, and we had gone to school together since we were kids. I knew all about her wild behavior, her numerous boyfriends, the endless list of men she had slept with. I had witnessed it firsthand. At prom, at parties, even from my own house when I saw her with different guys at different times. It wasn't just rumors. It was the reality of who she was. Yet, none of that mattered when she committed to me. I believed that she had changed for me, that I was the one who could finally tame her. What Brian didn't understand, I thought, was that this was different. We were deeply in love. I had always been afraid to get close to Michelle before, despite being in love with her since I was 12. I had been terrified of rejection, of her not seeing me as anything more than just a friend. But when she came to me that night at a party and asked why I'd never asked her out, I was stunned. Her question caught me off guard, and I fumbled for an answer. The timing never seemed right, I lied. But the truth was that I had always been afraid of her, afraid of losing the chance to be with her, afraid of how overwhelming her beauty and free-spirited nature were. Still, something changed that night. Despite my insecurities, we started dating, and soon I was falling deeper in love with her. But there was a nagging voice in my head, Brian's voice, that kept telling me it wouldn't last. I knew what he was saying was true in many ways, but I wanted to believe, I needed to believe that we could be different. Then came the day when we were out shopping, and Michelle stopped in front of a jewelry store, staring at the engagement rings. I knew what she was silently asking, and I couldn't ignore it. Later that night over dinner, Michelle asked me straight up, "Are we going anywhere, Jimmy? Are we just going to keep dating, or are you going to take us further?" It was time to be honest, and I didn't want to lie anymore. I took a deep breath and said, "I've known you since we were kids, Mickey. I've seen everything. Your wild behavior, your many lovers, your need for more. I don't think you're capable of being a single woman. I think you have an appetite for love that no man can satisfy, and I'm just not the type to share you." Her face fell, and for a moment she didn't speak. Then she wiped her mouth with her napkin, threw it on the table and said, "Take me home, Jimmy." When we arrived at her house, I walked her to the door. Without turning to look at me, she opened the door and said simply, "Goodbye, Jimmy," before closing it softly behind her. That was the moment it all hit me. The weight of the truth, the reality of what I had ignored. I had been warned, but I had chosen to ignore the past, hoping for a different future. But now I could see it clearly. The mistake I had made was not just marrying her. It was not listening to the warnings and believing that love could overcome everything. Couldn't. And now, I was left to face the consequences of ignoring the truth. It was a painful moment when I walked back to my car that evening, feeling the weight of loss settling into my chest. I had lost something precious, something I might never regain. The next morning I called Michelle, hoping against hope for reconciliation. Her voice was cold and distant. "We have nothing to say to each other, Jimmy. Please don't call me again." Her words were like daggers. But I couldn't stop. For the next 2 weeks, I called her every single day. Each time, as soon as she recognized my voice, she hung up. Her rejection was absolute. Finally, after 2 weeks of unanswered calls and shattered hopes, I stopped. I told myself I was over it, but the truth was I wasn't. Even though she wouldn't talk to me, I found solace in seeing her. On campus, Michelle was everywhere, walking across the quad at the bookstore, the student union, the cafeteria. Every Monday and Thursday, she was there in Professor Bradley's political science class at 10 a.m. And on Tuesdays and Fridays, we both sat in Rossman's managerial economics class at 9:15 a.m. Yet, no matter how many times I crossed her path, she ignored me. If she saw me, she turned her head. When I mustered the courage to greet her, my words fell into the void, unacknowledged. Summer break came, and though the classes ended, Michelle didn't disappear from my life. She still lived just 2 houses down. From time to time, I'd catch glimpses of her, but those encounters only deepened my heartache. Fall semester began, and despite her attempt to avoid me by dropping a shared class, she was still everywhere I turned. Michelle's presence was like a wound that refused to heal. Every time I saw her, it reopened. My heart ached for her, but I was too lost in self-pity to see the changes in her. The confident, vibrant Michelle who once had admirers swarming around her was gone. She was always alone now, a shadow of her former self. One day, just before spring break, as I sat in the student union lost in thought, Michelle pulled out a chair and sat across from me. For a moment we just stared at each other. Then she broke the silence. "I love you, Jimmy," she said, her voice trembling. "I love you, and it's killing me that we can't be together. I don't know how to convince you that you're wrong about us, but I haven't been with anyone since we broke up. I don't want anyone else. I need you, Jimmy. I need you so badly." Tears streaked her cheeks, and seeing her like that shattered me. Without hesitation, I reached across the table and held her hand. "Mickey," I said softly, "my life means nothing without you. I'd rather risk everything than live another day without you by my side." Her lips curved into a small, hopeful smile. "Do you want to skip class for the rest of the day?" she asked. That day we chose each other again. The next we picked out a ring. My parents eagerly helped plan the wedding, and soon Michelle and I were married. Our honeymoon was a whirlwind of passion and revelations. Michelle was a playful tease, full of surprises. We made love on the balcony of our hotel room, daringly exposed to the view of others. She wore provocative outfits, reveling in the attention but always redirecting her teasing humor back to me. It was exhilarating, intoxicating, and exhausting. After the honeymoon, life settled into a rhythm. We graduated, found jobs, and began climbing our respective corporate ladders. 4 years passed, and subtle changes crept into our lives. Michelle was promoted, and her after-work outings became more frequent. Her once innocent teasing took on a sharper edge, her late returns home leaving me uneasy. Yet I buried myself in work, brushing off the growing unease. Then came the day I came home unexpectedly. The house was quiet, but something was wrong. I walked up the stairs and opened the bedroom door to a scene I'll never forget. Michelle was there with another man. Her wide, tearful eyes met mine as she pushed him away. "Jimmy, no, please," she cried, scrambling to cover herself. The man bolted, his face pale with shame. "How could you?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "In our home, in our bed." My anger burned, but beneath it was a bottomless sorrow. The woman I loved, the one I'd fought so hard to be with, had betrayed me. I left that day, carrying the weight of heartbreak and betrayal. Michelle's words echoed in my mind, but they couldn't erase the image seared into my memory. Brian had warned me. Marrying her was a mistake. It was the biggest mistake of my life. That chapter ended, leaving me with scars that would never fully heal.